What are your qualifications?
Well, I attended Juilliard. I'm a graduate of the Harvard Business School. I travel quite extensively. I lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that. I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times, and it keeps getting funnier every single time I see it. Not to mention the fact that you're talking to a dead guy. Now, what do you think? I think I'm qualified.
What I mean is, can you be scary?
What do you think of this?
Well, I'm not trying to be scary. I'm trying to be Justin, and this is Talk Junkie. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Justin Perkins. This is Talk Junkie. Today, we're going to talk about things that are scary in a way and why we like to be scared. That opening little thing was a mixture. It's actually from a song from a band out of Louisville, Kentucky that's no longer together called Priapism. Yeah, look up that word. The voice over it is actually a clip from one of my favorite movies of all time, Beetlejuice. Song, I'm not exactly sure on the release date. As Donnie Baker or my friend Mandy would say, it's somewhere circus 1998, 97, somewhere in there probably. But a great song, and I thought somewhat fitting. And since I'm not making any money off these, I didn't figure it was illegal to use less than 30 seconds of it. And I acknowledged them, so there you go. Why do we like to kind of be scared? Why does fear-mongering work so well on us? Why does the media, entertainment, people in general use fear so prolifically? Well, that's an easy question to answer. The reason is because it works. If it bleeds, it leads. I think that if positive news stories would do better in terms of garnering attention and attracting an audience, if it would do much better than negative and fear-based news reporting, I believe they would honestly go that route, because at the end of the day, it's about money all the way around. But, you know, one of the largest segments of entertainment are thrillers and horror movies and things of that nature. Not everybody's that way, because granted, like, I don't know. I don't like sad, depressing movies for the most part. I mean, like, there's things I watch. I just watched SLC Punk again the other day for like the 1000th time, and when Bob dies, I want to cry, you know, and there's sad parts about it, but to me, the end of that movie overall is a positive ending. Now, there are some things, my wife is constantly on me that I watch depressing things, because I watch a lot of documentaries that are depressing, I guess, to her, but to me, the outcome in the end is what really matters. When you get that feel-good moment at the end of it, it's kind of worth the roller coaster. I don't see that in a lot of entertainment. Like, to me, in a horror movie, when you know, the guy kills 40 different people, and let me say, like, a horror movie, like something like Saw, something that's just a little too, I don't know, a little too bloody, a little too blood and guts, a little too real world. Possibly there's one of those guys hiding around, like Freddy Krueger or Jason or Michael Myers or, you know, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Those things killing people, I just kind of look at differently. I don't know why. And I'm not saying that that's fair or right. I'm just saying I do that. I don't know why I do it. That's just the way my messed up head works. And, you know, they say a lot of our music and video games are very violence-based, but that's been going on, you know. I remember in Columbine when that happened, you know, it was all about music and entertainment and things that they wanted to look away from the obvious mental conditions that these boys were suffering from. And, you know, really, everybody wants somebody to blame in a situation like that. And it seemed to me like the media and a lot of people really wanted to go after video games and movies and music especially. I never have listened to Marilyn Manson, never did. It's not that anything he does offended me. It's just not my type of thing, and I am a heavy metal guy. It's just not my type of thing. And I don't have any issue with anybody that does. I don't believe listening to Marilyn Manson will make you go commit a tragedy like Columbine. I think those young boys obviously had a mental issue going on there. That was an obvious problem there. It's obviously a problem that bullying was a big issue with that. And that's not to justify what they done. That's the problem with kind of talking about any topic is people are kind of dead set on how they feel about anything. And if you're talking about Columbine, certain people are just waiting for you to not mention the bullying because then you're not giving these murderers, because that's what they are, their fair shake or whatever. But then if you do mention bullying, you're defending these guys. I'm not defending them by any means. What they did was horrible, but there has to be a reason for what they did. And some people do it because, I'm assuming. I mean, I'm not an expert. I would have to assume that there has to be someone who's done things like that just because they're a bad person. That has to be a possibility. Because especially throughout history, murder and things of that nature were much more prevalent than they are now. So you would think, especially it appears in first world nations that goes away quicker than it does in other places because there's capital punishment and things like that in place to keep it in check, I suppose. But you do it instances, Charles Manson obviously is mentally deranged. I mean, there's nothing right about how that human functions. And you see that a lot in these people. Could our violent culture or our fear-based culture kind of trigger those things for them? I guess it's possible. I don't understand how, but I guess it's possible. Which I'm big on personal responsibility. If someone goes out and says X and Y are wonderful, and I love them. But Z, all the Z's are less than. All the Z's are horrible. All the Z's are bad. If people go behind and start killing the Z's because this guy said so, that's not a reflection as much on what this guy said as on how pathetic these people that do it are. That's not to say that we want to look at this person who says this and say, hey, you're a good guy. No, you want to say, hey, that's a piece of trash. Well, at least we know he's a piece of trash because he said these things. But these people that have acted on something that maybe he didn't even tell them to act on, he just talked down about these things and these people took it upon themselves to take action against that, then those people have to take personal responsibility. And so to blame someone's actions on some form of media, whatever it may be, even if it's the news, that's just not acceptable. There has to be some personal responsibility. There are some cases the mental issues are going to be so severe that there's no personal responsibility. That person will never understand the concept of personal responsibility. But I don't believe that any form of entertainment or media in itself could ever be the sole factor in someone doing something. I guess possibly if you took someone who was isolated, that's to say that they were completely kept outside of social interaction and social norms. They have never been involved with these things. Then you only gave them negative influences. You only gave them fear-based influences, and they were afraid of everything. Then it would be obvious that came from the influences. Or if you only gave them violent influences, it would be clear that they were only influenced by violent things. Whereas if you gave them mostly good input or all good input, then they would be mostly good, and it would be because I don't think they can be all good. I don't think any human has the ability to be all good. I think they have the ability to be all bad, but I do think and understand that I'm big on humans. I really like us. I think we're better than we get credit for. But I do think there is a limit to good in people, but not a limit to bad. And that's unfortunate, but I think that's just the makeup of people. I think to some degree it's a survival instinct and something that is not completely bred out of us yet from our original wiring and makeup. But I do believe at some point it will go away. I believe it goes away more and more every year. If you look at violence and quality of life and the way people are treated from now as compared to 100 years ago, it's ridiculously different. Compared to 500 years ago, it's phenomenal. Compared to 1,000 years ago, it's a different world. It's of no way, shape, or form even resembling the same beings as far as their interactions with one another. Especially if you look at first world nations at a certain level. Now, that is to say that for some reason we neglect a lower level of society, and that looks bad on us, but that's not everyone. There's a lot of people out there that they're so close to being all good that it's scary, and we meet those people throughout life, and they're highlights of our life generally. But to this thing about fear, we right now are in the middle of this coronavirus outbreak, and fear is playing a big part in this for a couple reasons. Because one, there's a legitimate fear there. You know, this isn't a joke. Like, this is it's an illness that is affecting a lot of people. It's unchecked because we don't have vaccines or medication yet. They're talking that medication is close. They're talking that vaccines are close, but every credible source I've looked at say vaccines, in all honesty, that may work are probably early 2021, which is almost a year away, and that's if they work then. But you've got a legitimate fear there, but you also have our media in our country came in and blew things out of proportion and really inaccurately depicted the situation in a lot of ways, and just spread some really false and untrue narratives that spread fear, which I'm sure the spike they got in ratings at that time had to be amazing. And they are one of the few, because see, our leadership, on the other hand, came in and really downplayed the situation, which was inaccurate and not a very smart move. Now, they've paid for that, especially, well, they've not paid for it, and nobody ever pays for anything as far as politicians go, but there's been ridicule and statements made against that. But the media, in a lot of ways, goes unchecked because they're never hardly singled out as single entities, other than one. Fox News gets singled out because it's kind of like the only conservative one. So, when you're the only one making noise about certain things, like, you're going to get singled out. Like, the whole media can be for something really good, and Fox will be like, no, this is bad. And vice versa. The whole media can be against something really good, and Fox can be like, no, this is a good thing, and the rest of the media is like, no. So they're very much owned by political parties, and by the people who invest in those political parties, because those political parties are very much owned. But regardless of ownership, fear is always a main ingredient in those sources. So in the middle of this coronavirus, we have fear-based media, and some leadership turned to fear-based pretty quick. Some leadership turned to rationally-based leadership, and did a fairly good job, but it was kind of, the damage was already done. The damage was done by the media. A certain section of people got so scared that nothing was going to bring them back, and then the president and that leadership done enough damage in the realm of, us nothing. It's really nothing. And so a lot of people are so far to the it's nothing category that there's no bringing them back, when really we fall somewhere in the middle. And if we could have looked at it with some rational thought, had some good rational reporting, and had good leadership who could rationally have looked at the situation and not made it about them, and the media couldn't have not made it about fear, then we could probably be in a lot better spot. But it seems like for some reason Americans don't seem to respond as well to that. You take almost any situation we're in as Americans, and we have an ability to be somewhat divided, and that comes down to the whole party politics and kind of tribalism. We've covered that in a couple different podcasts, but we seem to react better to fear as humans as a whole for some reason. Maybe not that we react better, but we react more and more willingly to fear. I mean, it's likely that that's the remnants of something very prehistoric in our genes. You think about it. If whatever predator is coming after you and your unit of people that you're traveling with at that time, tribe, whatever it is, a small group of people you're with, and fear kicks in, and you have to act and act quickly. The people who act better under fear are more than likely the ones going to survive, and those that survive repopulate, and that's how that trait gets passed along. So that trait easily over time could have morphed from a trait of positive intent of this person reacts well in fear. Fear is good in a way because fear brings out the best, and that kind of morphs into a society ruled by fear. And it's odd because of the place we are in history, as advanced and intelligent as we are, but also as much information as is out there. I didn't listen, in all honesty, to what the leadership had to say when this first started. So I didn't know how serious or not serious they were taking it. That will always be my last line of people to go to. I didn't turn to Joe Blow Doctor down the street either. I like to go to someone with a more specialized background. I like to look at specialist scientists, people in the field that look at this. But also, raw numbers out of context can be dangerous. But, I'm never... See, I'm one of those people that if I keep touching something and it burns my hand, I'm not going to touch it 10 times. I'm probably only going to touch it once, and every time after that, I'm going to kind of check to see if it's hot. I don't want to risk getting burnt every time. So I'm not going to look at numbers out of a place like China and go, oh, okay, let me look at these. I'm not going to look at numbers from something like CNN and go, oh, let me look at these. I'm definitely not going to look at numbers from something like Fox, or most definitely not CNBC, and go, okay, let me look at those. Let me see just what the numbers are out of context, because I think a lot of people do that. You pop up a graph, you pop up some numbers, and people look at them and they go, oh, okay, this. It's important to look for some type of guidance when looking at these numbers, looking at things of this nature. And amidst the coronavirus, there's been a lot of specialists on either side of it, a lot of research scientists and a lot of infectious disease specialists and people of that nature on each side of it. But someone done a very good article the other day, and I keep forgetting who it was. I don't believe it was the Washington Post. Could have been, but someone done a very good article the other day where they set a bunch of these people down and went, okay, there's things you don't agree on about the coronavirus, but let's look at the things you do. Things that unequivocally you aren't willing to argue about, that the numbers, the proof, and the science are so firm on these things that there's nothing to really argue about. Those things were so positive that it really got me upbeat. And it said, death toll wise, at that time we were going to be able to kind of stay. Any death is horrible, but right now we're around 500 and some, I believe, nationally at the time that I looked that up for this podcast. So that's nowhere near where the projections put us. That's closer to what these people said, and these people were very optimistic about it coming out and stuff. That has not been really emphasized on the news. Actually, I heard that via a podcast. I looked it up, read it for myself. But very, very little of that information is getting out. It is, however, getting out on podcast. That's one thing that I've noticed in doing this podcast is how I think about what I'm saying before I say it, because I don't want to give a false impression. But on the other hand, especially something like this, I wouldn't want to cause false fear. I have been called a fearmonger once, but I covered that in another episode. You can check that out. It was a ridiculous statement. But in listening to other forms of alternative information that's outside the news, outside of the media, I find that there's a lot more discussion going on, and many more people actually taking the time to interact with people who are deserving of being asked these type of questions. the problem with what we call the news in the United States of America is it's not really news. It's a 24-hour cycle, but I would say probably 2 hours or 23 hours and 45 minutes of it a day is strictly opinion, is op-ed type stuff, opinion-based conversations, and very emotionally driven conversations, whereas about 15 minutes of it is probably just plain, here's the meat and potatoes, this is the news, this is what's actually going on. And you'll notice that very little of that is positive. Now, there are some small news, local stations and stuff that pride themselves. We do one feel-good story and that and things of that nature. And every once in a while, Dateline, these things, they'll throw a feel-good on there. And I don't know if we just don't react that well to it, if advertisers don't like it, if it doesn't do the numbers that the bad does, but it appears that obviously it's not doing the numbers, that we have this desire for fear. We have this desire for the negative. And it seems like it's a constant attempt to show the other up. And I'm curious. I'm curious if the numbers really just don't show the possibility of positivity and lack of fear-based entertainment being lucrative. It's just hard for me to believe that. Which each generation is gonna go in a certain direction, and it's hard sometimes in the moment to look at something and see it for what it is. It's much later to look at it later. It's much easier to look at it later and go, okay, now that I've stepped back, now that there's distance between me and that situation and me in that time frame, I can see it for what it is. And this is kind of a ridiculous model, but let's look at entertainment in the 80s. Okay, entertainment in the 80s was always the same thing. Disenfranchised, nerdy youth, picked on by popular, rich, athletic youth. Outrageous things ensue. The picked on youth ends up doing things in the same manner that the youths that picked on them did, and do horrible things to these people, and then in the end it all works out. And that was so oppression and bullying, maybe even to a certain degree, was the emphasis of that in the 80s. And now you come into the 2000s, and now there's an anti-bully push, there's things of that nature. And I think after that time frame, that bullying may have hit a high point and escalated, and now is going back, which social media bullying is a different thing. Like I said, that's not an all-encompassing or a large-scale thing like what we're looking at, because that's looking at a 10-year period, whereas with the United States and our media system, with the whole fear thing, I don't know when it started, because I've only been around since the 80s, but you see a lot of these editorials, you notice these clips that they show and these editorials that it seemed like during wartime and during, World War I and World War II, that those news briefs and those things that you see video of and these newspaper clippings you read, they read more like something from 1984. They read something more like just the total greatness of the country and this positivity. And it seems like there was, for whatever reason, this air of positivity around that reporting and around that news. And I don't know that was true as a whole, but, as history is a lot of times seen in through a different lens than it's lived through, and obviously it's altered by those who currently control the present. But to me, it seemed like that was more of a positive and less of a fear-based reporting. It may very well have been, and I've heard, and again, I wasn't there, and I don't have, this is not a factual statement. This is me talking to older people who lived through that time period and those things that, I would hear when I was younger. Yeah, they would say a lot of things were good that weren't really good. So it was false information to a certain degree, but it was on the positive side. We're getting false information often now, but we're not getting it to the positive. We're getting it to the negative. We're getting it to the fear-mongering side. And that works very well. It works good for websites and Facebook posts. And it's amazing at our ability to scare ourselves. We don't need a boogeyman. Modern Americans don't need a boogeyman. We are the scariest thing under the bed. No doubt. We're in our own closets. It's a matter of we want to, I don't know, maybe life's become too easy and too good, because I hear a lot, and it's the reason that one of my favorite podcasts I ever done was The World Isn't as Bad as It Seems podcast. You know, because when we really look at the numbers and we really think about how lucky we are and we really look at where we are as a people, we live in the best time in the history of the world. Now, granted, there's things that definitely need to change. A lot of people are slaves to jobs that they hate. A lot of people never get a break. A lot of people are held down by a system that's really rigged to only let a certain number succeed. And the old saying is, if you work hard enough, you'll get out of there. I know some people that's worked really damn hard and haven't got out of anything, and it's because of a lack of a break. It's because they weren't in the right place at the right time. And that's not an ideal situation for anybody. So we definitely have improvements we can make. The way we treat other peoples, the way we elect leaders, our political system, period. We have a guy worth, I think it's $2 million, claiming to be a socialist, and we have a spray-tanned guy who just can't seem to get over himself leading the country. And we have a person basically with what seems to be either Alzheimer's or a mental deficiency on a level that isn't probably safe for somebody to have nuclear codes, also running for president. And we only have two options, and those options are bought and paid for. The Republicans and Democrats are bought and paid for. So there's things that could definitely be improved, but you have to look at things as a whole. You have to look at things collectively, and you have to look at things positively and without fear. And if you look at things positively, and if you look at things collectively and as a whole, we as Americans are in a better place than we've ever been. There's areas that we go back and forth in, but the world is in a much better place than it's ever been in collectively. There's always been so many issues that now people really are uniting together to work for. Now, there's always going to be things. And you should never forget about those things. I'm not saying, hey, don't bring up the negatives. Don't bring up the rainforest. Don't bring up global warming. No, bring them up. Bring them up often. But don't let your fear of the unknown or your fear of what bad's out there completely devour and overshadow the good. Because, I mean, there's a lot of value in that good. That good gives you something to build off of. Good's like stone, and you can build off a good stone foundation. Fear is like quicksand. You can't build on quicksand, you'll sink. The harder you fight and the harder you work, the harder to pull you down. And we're living in a society that's breeding fear. It's not just this. It's not just the coronavirus. That's a very small part of a very, very large problem. I mean, in all honesty, the coronavirus is a serious thing. So there's going to be a certain amount of fear. That fear is being exploited, I feel, severely. But also there's going to be a certain amount of, I don't know. I'm having a blank. There's a certain amount of real fear, but there's a whole lot of manufactured fear. And it seems like the manufactured fear gets a whole lot more attention than the real fear does. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. If anything, let's manufacture hope. Let's not manufacture hope to the point that we lose track of reality. That's just as bad in the opposite direction. But it's kind of like that clip at the first. It's like we're this innocent person who's scared, who's in a situation they've never been in. And we're having to turn to someone like the news or leader for information, and we're asking them, what's your qualifications for this? And they tell us all these horrible things that mankind's been through, and at the end of it, all we want to know is, can you be scary? What do you think of this? Watch the evening news. Actually, I don't recommend that at all. It's something I no longer do. And people hear me say that, and I get a lot of crap for that. I get a lot of negative feedback on, well, you don't watch the fear, you don't watch the fear, you don't watch the news, then how do you really know what's going on? Let me say it this way. I don't watch network news. I don't watch NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox. I never even hardly acknowledge the existence of MSNBC. If something's going on in regards to something in the House, the Senate, something of that nature, C-SPAN covers a good chunk of that. You can get clips of things from C-SPAN. Now, another very dangerous source for news is YouTube and podcasts. So I don't do that. I will look for an expert on an issue when I find an issue, but, how do I find the issue? Well, a lot of times I'll go online. NPR is considered a very liberal news organization. I don't find them to be dishonest. Some people do. I look at NPR often. And I wish I wouldn't have said that. Let me say this. Get online, because I don't want to influence the way you think and the way you find things. Get online. Find news that you feel like is accurate. Take their top stories for a week, for 2 weeks. Validate those stories in any way you can. Look up experts. Look up and verify those experts. It is hard. It does take time. It does take work, but it only takes work at first. Once you kind of get in the habit of, okay, these sources seem credible, these are fairly, on a normal basis, they're credible. If it's a situation that's a real situation, a real issue, a big issue, fact check it. It's not hard. Snopes doesn't always lie. Snopes isn't always leaning to the left. Sometimes Snopes is incorrect. Use more than one way to check. Always look up people, even if you use YouTube. Look up scientists, people who really focus on that subject and is, quote, a specialist in that subject. See if they've released papers. If they release papers, read them. If you can't understand them completely, read them to the best of your ability. Check these people online. What are people saying about them? Well, this, that. And make sure that it can be verified, what you do find. Now, like I said, that seems like work, but, it is work, because the easiest thing to do is manipulate somebody when news is emotional to them. And news is now emotional to people. So you've got two versions of the news, the conservative version and the liberal version, or the socialist version, whichever it is for that week. And they're very much impacted by the organizations that deliver them. They're both fear-mongering. They're just fear-mongering in different directions. Now, occasionally, when they get together and they both fear-monger on something together, well, that's something worth paying attention to, because somebody's really trying to pull the wool over your eyes, or it's something that you should really, really be worried over. But it doesn't hurt to look. It doesn't hurt to put the effort in. And look, you don't need to know about every single thing coming and going. That's another thing. Like, I don't need to know everything, every minute of everyday entertainment news. That's something that I don't know if it's skewed one way or the other, fear mongering way. I don't know. I don't know because I don't listen to it. I don't pay it attention. When I see something on Facebook, to me that's been the hardest thing, is something on social media that has a news element to it and not reacting to it irrationally. Not getting it and going, well, oh no, that's wrong, or oh man, that's right. That's hard. Especially like right now, there's a bill they're trying to get passed, and I see all these things. The Democrats blocked this bill, and they don't want people to get help through the coronavirus. Then I read the bill, because these bills are available. They're available to people. You can go get them. And I looked at the things that were put in there, and I looked at the big companies that were getting bailed out. And I looked at the favors that the Republicans were doing and the things that they were trying to sneak in. And it was ridiculous. And then the Democrats came back with a solution. Here's another bill, 1,000 and some pages. I've read, I would say, 80% of it. Yeah, they left a lot of things. They took a lot of things out. Took some bad things out. Put a lot of bad things in. Put a lot of ridiculous things in. Funding for the oceanic something research, I don't know, for the prevention of coronavirus. Part of this, and it's depending, the Democrats want to give money for longer, the Republicans don't want to. There's a lot of fine print stuff like that. But one of the big things is, who do you give money to? And one of the initial plans, I don't remember which bill it was, but this was covered more with them just kind of explain it in depth on a video on, I believe it was from C-SPAN. It's, okay, I don't remember if it was $90,000 and under a year, we're going to give them $1,000, whatever it is. The criteria was under $100,000 to receive the money. Okay, if you look at, and I don't know if the Democrats inserted this, I can't remember if it was there. Either way, if the bill got passed today, whether the Republicans put it in, Democrats, or both of them agreed upon it, they're looking at accessing $500,000, I believe what it was. Could have been $5 million, can't remember, but I want to say it was actually closer to $500,000 to pay the judges in the Supreme Court justices. There's 9 of which 8 are millionaires. We've got an issue with where the issue actually is in this country. What we're worried about, a lot of people keep saying they're worried about the economy. Well, the everyday person, the middle class and lower class people are the backbone of the country, and by population we represent the largest majority, even though we don't represent the largest majority of money and holdings. But that should be the issue. It should be as simple as passing a bill that says we're giving money to these people, nothing else is getting stuck in there. But that's not how our system works. And if that was addressed on the media, if that was addressed with people that, look, this is what it should be, and this is how it should work, but instead it's, well, nobody's going to get anything, and it's fear-mongering from both sides that we're not going to get anything, and it's using your fear of the other party against you. So, can I be scary? Well, in the words of Beetlejuice, what do you think of this? Of course I can. I could get on here and fear-monger every week, but I don't believe in it. Not at all. In regards to a quote, I don't know if it even fits, but it doesn't always have to. Nietzsche said, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." I think that's pretty good advice regardless of what we're talking about.